Welcome to UNCAGED. Today we're speaking with James Dixson. Now, we're going to be talking a lot about technology today. James has an extensive career as a CTO. He is the founder of the Software Factory, which is a fractional CTO service company. He's also the chief technology partner at BetterSoftware.dev that specializes in helping organizations with large software teams. And we're talking about 1,000+ engineers mature their software development practices. And so technology. And as we all know, there's not a shortage of topics in the tech space. So I'm excited to get into that. But before we get there, James, tell us a little bit about you and your career.
Oh, well, again, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. So I've been building software now for 30 years. My degree originally was in astronomy, believe it or not.
Wow.
But I kind of figured out early on that I enjoyed building things more than writing grant proposals. So, so I kind of moved out of the astronomy and I started in quality assurance for a carrier class telecom company. I think they were called DSC Communications. Um, and I built automation tools in C and this language called Tickle Expect, which not many people know about anymore, but was very popular in the day. And it was kind of a mid-sized kind of corporation, and I learned a lot about building kind of long timescale projects there, right? Telecom, very standards driven, very technical. Um, After doing that for a few years, I jumped into the dot-com boom in the late 90s. The first startup focusing on test automation software for large enterprises. So again, talking to people like Bell Labs, Qualcomm, Nortel. And then kind of after the telecom boom ended, I bounced around, did a few other datacom startups. I worked for one of the first grid computing companies where were commercializing a version of the SETI at home technology. If you or your viewers remember that little tool back then, and I learned things about using like IRC for chat ops and building all kinds of processes around that. Overall, I've worked for maybe a dozen startups over the years, and I've been acquired 4 times.
Wow. I mean, James, that's a lot. And the technology space, when you say 30 years, I just think about kind of my own career, my own life. And I think probably younger people have no sense of how dramatically things have changed in the last 30 years. But you've seen it all, and now you are the chief technology partner at BetterSoftware.dev. And I found your role really interesting because there are some extensive, really complicated tech projects that are going on these days. And the idea that you're working with large teams, I love that. Tell me a
Yeah.
little bit about how Better Software works.
Well, so there's always this. It comes down to how does one go about producing software consistently, right? So we sometimes we've heard this statement that others have made, right? That the natural state of software is maintenance, right? As engineers, we all want to build new things and we like to go after the shiny object or the new tool. And there's a lot of FOMO about, we shouldn't, I want to do a microservice or we really should be using Rust or these types of things. And for a large organization, it's very hard for them sometimes to parse that kind of stuff out, right? And oftentimes what you're really trying to do is just get into that consistent output and understanding how you can steer a ship of 100 or 1,000 or 5,000 engineers all in the right direction, for your business. And it's complicated because there's multiple levels of delivery that's involved. Sometimes there are regulatory requirements that you have to comply to, and you've got varying skill levels with your staff, right? You can't, in a startup environment, maybe depend upon 1 or 2 star players to kind of carry you through, right? You've got to figure out how to get a large group to do something consistently. So when I was coming up, over the years, right? I came up at a time when software was just becoming, I guess you could say, a real profession in engineering, right? I mean, when I started, engineering meant building hardware. So at that telecom company, right, we're building cards and boards, and they're moving signals, like, across wires and things. And software was kind of like, okay, we got to add the software. It's the last thing that you did, right? You just kind of tacked it on and shipped it out. You didn't really think about the control. Now everything's inverted, right? Software is where you start and oftentimes where you live when you're building a large project. Or and so you have to start thinking about it in a way, in an engineering way, with processes and controls and being able to measure your effectiveness at different levels. And so what we do at BetterSoft is we help companies understand how to actually look at their software development program in a methodical way, to understand where they're actually spending their time, where they're actually spending their effort, and how they can actually move things forward from where they are.
And James, I mean, it's an interesting one because moving things forward now, over the last 4 or 5 months, we've read about a lot of technology companies making shifts on their teams, some layoffs, some real shifts of priorities. I imagine that presents some real challenges for companies. Tell me a little bit about how you and the team can essentially support that and deal with some of those issues.
Well, sometimes in those types of situations, right, companies are doing layoffs or they're doing some kind of reorganization, restructured, and they're looking for efficiencies, right? They're looking for ways to get more out of who they have, or focus on just the products that are actually giving them the most return, right, for their investment. The skills that we bring to these companies with BetterSoft, helps them make that assessment fairly. As an example, one of the things that we might ask a company when we come in is we'll go to let's say their head of engineering for large software group, and we'll ask them, so in your last release, let's make a list of all of the tests that failed in your QA program and ask, why did they fail? Did they fail because of an actual problem with your product, right, that you caught? Or did they fail because there was a problem in your infrastructure? It didn't get set up properly. Maybe there was a logical or miscommunication of the requirements and the test itself was invalid, right? And let's look at the ratio, right, of failures that were of that for a reason that was other than functional, right? And if you have a team and that number is, let's say, 50% of your failures are not a result of an actual product problem, then there's an efficiency somewhere that you can grid, right? Because you're generating noise in your
Yeah,
process, right?
yeah.
You're causing somebody to look at a test and say, is this a real failure? Maybe that takes a minute, maybe that takes a day.
Yeah.
Well, that's a day of somebody's time that they're not doing something else.
How do you find things like, documenting code? I mean, I feel like sometimes, when I talk to emerging companies, they're moving so fast that they're just
Yeah.
crap when it comes to documenting code.
Well, I deal with that a lot, with dealing with startups, as well through my private practice, and it's always that hit, you don't want to do the wrong thing, right? So it's like, okay, I'm going to go out, I'm going to sign up with GitHub because everybody's on GitHub. I'm going to go get Jira because everybody has Jira. So I've got my GitHub, I've got my Jira, I'm tracking things, right? And maybe I'm documenting, maybe I'm writing a requirement or a story, and understanding when to kind of layer in that process, right, is a challenge, right, for a lot of teams. In a startup environment, right, what you're really trying to do first and foremost is establish whether or not anybody cares about what you're doing at all, right? You want to get that feedback back from the customer and processes in a way that you can take action on it, right? As you get bigger, things like documentation, things like requirements planning become more important because now you're dealing with more people day to day, right? And so helping the teams understand when to make those cutoffs is an important skill.
And James, I mean, right now, last year, suddenly machine learning or generative AI went from not being a topic that was even discussed really to now being the only topic that gets
Yes, yes.
discussed. Just be curious how that's impacting some of the work that you and the team are doing.
Well, I think I see a lot of the impact on a more practical level, right? So many of the companies that we consult with, right, certainly have some kind of AI, machine learning, data science aspect to it, right? And there's a nuts and bolts kind of data science, machine learning, and then there's the AGI hype that you hear about and such, right? For most companies, the practical concern is just how do you try to integrate something like AI or machine learning into your product? Now, startups are going to try and form and they're going to go direct and try to build a new plugin for ChatGPT or whatever, right? But for a large established company, it may be something a lot more mundane. It may just be something as simple as, let's say I've got a medical device and that device is making measurements. Is there a way that I can use machine learning to enhance that product? And then what's involved in that, right? If you're in a regulatory environment, what does that mean from regulatory compliance, to incorporate a machine learning model into your workflow? What is the output going to do? And so for a lot of these companies that are trying to walk into that piece, it's time disentangling and trying to understand what does that mean for validation, for certification, for quality, to incorporate that kind of technology into their existing product lines. So I think there's a mix, right? There's definitely hype. There's definitely a lot of angst in some markets, but in others, it's much more practical.
Yeah.
How do I manage hundreds of models that maybe I have to change weekly in order to make something work?
How hard is it for your talent to pick up the skills to at least, obviously, maybe not build the direct algorithm and the direct models, but maybe work with existing models in the generative AI space?
Well, I think it comes down to first and foremost is defining your criteria for success. I mean, and this applies whether you're trying to incorporate AI or you're trying to shift to a microservices architecture or you're trying to move from on-premise to the cloud or from the cloud to the edge or whatever transition you're trying to make, right? You have to define your criteria for success. You've got to set a goal and you've got to set mechanisms where you can measure whether or not you're making progress to that goal, right? So, and because otherwise you're just throwing money into a program that says, hey, I got AI or whatever trend that's popular at that time, and you won't know. You'll spend a lot of money. There'll be a few people that'll see big accelerations in their careers because they're on the forefront. But at the end of the day, you've not really built anything.
The mentality, I think, at big companies quite often is let's structure something as a limited trial. Let's kind of put it off in a silo and see how it functions. And then if it works, then let's see how we can expand it. But I think that, what you're going to have is a lot of duplication of effort. It's inevitable. A lot of it just has to do with the fact that, a lot of big companies struggle with that promotion model, right? I mean, somebody wants to just put this on their resume so they get to the next
Yeah,
job, right? So
yeah.
it is what it is. But James, I mean, I love what you're saying. I hear kind of an undercurrent of make sure that you have the foundation, make sure that you have the structure in place here. But clearly, you've been passionate about the technology space for your whole career. Tell
Oh,
me a
yeah.
little bit about what drives that.
I think it's just the excitement of building new things. I mean, I could have, when I started in carrier class telecom, I could have stayed there. I could have kept doing that for 30 years and just kept doing the same kinds of things. But I like going out and I like learning new things and I like learning how to build things that are helpful to people. I've always found that I gravitate towards particularly projects that are infrastructural in some aspect, right? I mean, I did telecom before the telecom boom of .com, and I moved into datacom just as Cisco was becoming dominant in the early 2000s. I did the second startup that was acquired. I did was a video game streaming appliance for Xboxes and PlayStations. We did that over 10 years ago and sold to GameStop. I mean, it was like doing things before their standard has a big appeal to me because you get to kind of figure out, you get to kind of experiment and see what's going on. But in all of that, in all of those successes and all of those failures, right, it all comes down to the same thing. It's like understanding what it is that you're trying to build, what measures of success that is, and just trying to put all the other things to the side and just focus on the things that are going to make you successful and the things that actually move the dial for your business. Whether you're just trying to make that first sale or whether you're trying to sustain yourself in your market position, as a large company.
Well, James, tell me then the magic, the $100 million question. What's going to make a technology business successful in 2024?
I think it's managing to goals, setting real, measurable, falsifiable goals and working to them. You can't follow the hype. Just because everybody is doing AI doesn't mean that maybe you should. Just because everybody's on microservices doesn't mean you should, right? Whatever the hype that you hear out there, right? You've got to ask your question, how is this really going to apply to what I'm doing and to my business? Maybe it's big, maybe it's not, but you have to get in front of it and you have to define what success means for you when you make those types of changes and choices.
I mean, James, that is very wise. And I think of all of the discussions that I see in C-suites where, you'll have the CEO, some character like myself that will go to a conference and rush back and be like, James, we got to be putting all of our money now in blah, blah, blah. And it really is, I think, great when a business has a CTO like yourself and obviously the folks that you're putting into these places and building to be that voice of reason of how to move forward. Well, James, it's been great chatting with you. If someone wanted to learn more about what you and the team at Better Software are doing, where's the best place to reach you?
I think the best case would be to hit us up on our website, BetterSoftware.dev. We kind of talk about the framework that we use. We have some testimonials and things that are up there that you can review. Send us an email, and we'd be happy to have a conversation.
Excellent. Well, James, thanks so much for being on the UNCAGED show. We've been speaking with James Dixson. He is the Chief Technology Partner at Better Software. They specialize in helping organizations with large software teams mature their software development practices. And we've been kind of seeing a theme here today. We've been talking a lot about technology, but at the end of the day, if you're going to really see technology move forward, it's absolutely critical to manage the projects and to have goals and hit those goals and move forward so you actually realize the dreams that you and your companies have and your enterprises have. James, thank you so much for being on the show today, and we look forward to having you back.
Thank you for having me.